Welcome everyone. Today we are celebrating the 10th year anniversary of the Sumait Prize. My name is Majed Al-Majed and I work at the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Sciences. I'm very proud to welcome you all today to this roundtable video with Al-Sumait Laureates. Our first Al-Sumait laureate, Dr. Kevin Marsh, was awarded in 2015 for his extraordinary work in combating malaria. A distinguished member of the University of Oxford and the African Academy of Sciences in Kenya, Dr. Marsh has dedicated his career to controlling and eradicating malaria, a disease that affects the health of tens of millions of African children, women, and men. It is my honor to present Professor Salim Abdulkarim, Director of KFAS, the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, and a 2018 Sumait Prize laureate. Professor Abdulkarim is renowned for his groundbreaking contributions to HIV/AIDS research and prevention. Under his leadership, KFAS has advanced scientific understanding and developed innovative solutions, significantly improving public health outcomes across Africa. Lastly, we are honored to have His Excellency the Ambassador at Large, Dr. John Nkensong, U.S. Global AIDS Coordinator and the Senior Bureau Chief for Global Health Security and Diplomacy, who was awarded the 2022 prize in recognition of his essential role in developing Africa's response to disease outbreak and for being the chief scientist directing Africa's response to COVID-19. Gentlemen, thank you for all being fantastic laureates and joining us on this important call. If I can first launch the session by beginning with, tell us about your experience about winning the prize and how it transformed your activities as a researcher and as a scientist and as a contributor to battling health issues in Africa. Dr. Kevin, if you don't mind beginning, please.
Thanks very much, Majed. Well, and I'm sure my colleagues will say pretty much the same as I do. It was an enormous honor to be awarded the prize. It was very exciting. It's transformed my, if you like, work, not so much in terms of my research, because I was awarded the prize at the stage where I was transitioning somewhat in my career. I mean, I'm still an active researcher, but my greater concentration of efforts was becoming more around contributing to building ecosystems for research in Africa, leadership in Africa. And the way it transformed my work was it enabled me to actively support a number of the initiatives I was very involved in. So I felt very privileged and honored to be able to use the prize in order to support those new initiatives that I was involved in. So, and it has made a very big impact. In fact, later on we'll talk about it. I don't want to talk too much about it now, but it certainly has allowed me and my colleagues to do things which otherwise would not have been able to do.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kevin. Professor Salim, can you tell us about how your career transformed and how your activities transformed after the Sumait Prize Award?
Well, it was indeed a great honor and somewhat humbling to have been selected for the award. You know, in terms of the use of the award and its contribution, it has been transformative. HIV in Africa remains one of our greatest long-standing threats, and the purpose to which we use the funds that were obtained from this award was to pursue a particular avenue of research in this vein, where we were developing a broadly neutralizing antibody, to use it as a potential 6-month injectable prevention mechanism. And of course, we've had, no less than half a dozen postgraduate students trained within this program, and now there's several more that are just about finishing up. So it's been an amazing journey to be part of this award and its contribution to science in South Africa and Africa more broadly.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor Salim. Dr. Nkensong, if I might have you jump in regard to how your career transformed and your focus of your support to African research has transformed since the award winning.
No, absolutely. I think there's clearly no doubt that the prize helps in catalyzing existing efforts. As others have said, the prize by itself is just a huge and tremendous recognition. And anyone who received the prize feels terribly honored and humbled at the same time. When you get a prize of about 500,000 euros, I mean, what I did was to donate that to a non-governmental organization in Cameroon to help facilitate access to healthcare in vulnerable populations, and especially populations that have migrated from a war zone in western part of Cameroon to the eastern part of Cameroon. And there were adolescent girls, young women that are extremely vulnerable, people that had nothing to do, had no access to healthcare, reproductive care was almost zero. I mean, people who were striving to eat, where their priority is just to eat. I mean, and you can be amazed that $500,000 goes a long way to re-elevating, providing access to healthcare. And it requires that it's not a typical research that you invent things and you discover things, but you really understand how in mobile and migrant populations internally in the same country, how a catalytic support and funding can help elevate a lot of that.
Dr. Kevin, can you go a little bit deeper into, since you won the award, what actual activities did you fund? Because you talked about it when we had our conversations one-on-one. Can you tell me about some of the activities that you focused on?
Yeah, sure. So basically, been fortunate to be able to use the funding to support activities around particularly young researchers in Africa, and they're in three areas. One was at the beginning supporting the development of the affiliates in the African Academy of Sciences, which I was very passionate about, sort of bringing together some of the most promising young researchers across the continent. The second was to put some of the fund into helping the development of an organization, a Pan-African organization called Science for Africa, where I'm speaking to you from now in Nairobi.
Yes.
And perhaps the largest amount went into enabling us to start a new organization called the Africa Oxford Initiative. And this is based in Oxford, my home university. It's a platform across the entire university for supporting the development of equitable partnerships with colleagues across the continent. And in that respect, we've been able to support partnerships in now 34 different African countries with over 120 institutions across a whole range of research areas. And we've been able to leverage the award. We couldn't have started without it. We had no funding. So basically,
wow.
of the Al-Sabah Prize, and we've been very fortunate with working with colleagues across the continent and in the UK to leverage enormously. So now I'm really happy to say we've got really major funding from a number of organisations, and so that's massively, if you like, leveraged the award. So we've been very happy, more than happy. I mean, we could not have done this without the award.
Dr. Kevin, those words are amazing, and I appreciate it. And that the milestones that you state are incredible. Professor Salim, if I might ask you the same, how did you invest all of the award to support all of your activities going forward?
So in 2012, we made a discovery that there was a young woman in one of our studies that had an unusual antibody. And so normally when people get infected with HIV, they produce antibodies. That's pretty standard for any virus. But in these rare individuals, they can make an antibody that can kill a very wide range of viruses, very wide range of different forms of HIV, because the normal person will make an antibody that just kills the infecting strain and nothing else. Yes. So when we looked at her blood, we found that her antibodies could kill, in a panel of 400 viruses from throughout the world, her blood could kill 4 out of every 5. And that was quite striking that, here we have somebody with this kind of breadth. But something unusual about her antibody was its potency. And so right now, in the world of HIV humoral immunity, there are about 8 or 9 different antibodies that are being developed clinically. Of those, Caprisa 256, which is the code name from the patient that provided the antibody.
And that's why you named your organization in a similar way?
Yeah, so she's named because she was the 256th patient we enrolled in.
Amazing, yeah.
So she's called Caprisa 256. So the Caprisa 256 antibody is the most potent of all of these antibodies. So it's a highly potent antibody. That means that you need very small quantities to kill the virus. In fact, when we did an animal study where we manufactured the antibody and we provided it to our colleague Dan Baruch at Harvard, and he injected monkeys with it, we found that even at the lowest possible dose that we gave it, all the monkeys were protected. So we've yet not been able to infect a monkey that's been given this Caprisa 256 antibody. But one of the key things that it did was it enabled us to send one of the doctoral students to the Vaccine Research Center at the NIH. So she went there with vials of the blood from this patient to go and find the B cell that makes this antibody. Now, you must know that, in blood, there's lots of B cells, there's lots of all other cells. It's a needle in a haystack to find that one B cell that makes this particular antibody. So we estimated that roughly 1 in 10,000 B cells will make this particular antibody. And so we gave her the almost impossible task of saying, go and find that B cell, knowing that it's very unlikely she's going to be able to do that. But she worked there, and she had 3 months scholarship to go there and do this work. Just before she was about to leave, I got the call.
Yeah.
Found a cell, one cell that made this antibody. And that valuable cell, that precious cell, we then took into our lab, we cloned it, and we put it into culture. And that's how we were able to start making the antibody ourselves.
In terms of challenges, what can you identify from your areas of expertise and where you're sitting from, your perspective? What are the challenges of doing research in Africa? Is it a financial issue? Is it a political issue? Is it a cultural issue, educational issue? What are your key areas of challenge, Dr. Kevin?
Well, it's one of those questions where you could say all of the above, and that doesn't help very much. But let me focus on financial for sure. And I think we'd all share the perspective that there needs to be much more investment at every level in research across the continent, particularly from our governments. And this is the thing I know we're all actively engaged with. You can do nothing without money. But money is not all at all. There's a whole issue of infrastructure in the broadest sense, infrastructure in terms of physical capacity, but also in terms of, if you like, the capacity, critical mass capacity intellectually. There's been enormous development over the last 40 years across the continent in terms of the development of young researchers going on to become research leaders. But, when you look at the figures internationally, as a continent as a whole, although there's a lot of variation from country to country, and Salim works in a country which is better than most in terms of the numbers, but I'm sure he would say it's still not nearly enough investment. If you look at the continent as a whole, it's way below in terms of number of researchers per head of population than even the international average. The international average is about 1,000 per million. Countries like the UK, USA, around about 5,000 or 6,000 per million. As an estimate across the entire continent, which is perhaps not fair because there is a lot of variation, but it's around about 150, 200 per million. So even with all the money in the world, you can't do anything unless you really developing the leadership. And I think that's what all three of us on this call have spent a lot of our energies doing. And that really does need to happen.
Yeah. Professor Salim, do you want to add to the question of challenges?
Well, I was going to say pretty much, ditto to everything Kevin said. But I would just add one additional issue. We have to find a way to convince our own African countries to invest in science. They have to see it as an investment for the future. They can't see it as just an expenditure line item, but they will see it as an investment. Because the only way to build a long-term sustainable future in science is to ensure that there's strong buy-in from our own countries. As much as, we can raise money from the NIH or the European Union and so on, it's having your own countries make that investment. And even if it's a matching investment, even if it's 20 cents on the dollar, but you gotta have some stake in the game. You gotta have some ownership of what we do.
Yes.
And that ensures that we're building for the long term. So we're not building for as long as the vagaries of what a foundation wants to give us, but we're building in 20, 30-year time horizons, because our biggest need is to have not just scientists, but to have scientific leaders. Leaders who are able to stand up and show the power of science, and to take Africa out of its begging bowl mentality to one of innovation, of contributing to global solutions, that we are part and parcel of the forefront of science. And I think that's when scientists can hold their heads up high. That's when science can contribute to African governments holding their heads up high. So I think it's that long-term approach is one that I very firmly believe in, and put a lot of emphasis into trying to build.
Majed, can I just add something?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
To what Salim said, just to totally agree with his emphasis on sort of investment by governments. And one of the things that I think is interesting, at a continental level, there is a commitment in the sense that Africa, unlike any other continent, has a continental vision called Vision 3. And that's totally committed to the building of knowledge-based economies. And you can't build knowledge-based economies without investing in the knowledge. So at that level, there's a commitment. And so I guess the challenge that we find also frustrating is moving from that broad commitment to a specific so put the money in. And I'm always reminded of what I think it was Nehru, the first president of India, said when he was challenged when India had become independent, why he was going to invest so much money in science, because people say condescending things like, because India is a poor country. And he said, it's exactly because India is a poor country that we have to invest in science. And I think that's a general message, I think, that we would all buy into, that you have to invest in science, not for science's sake, but for building the broader knowledge-based economies, which are essential for development.
Yes. Dr. John, you spoke to me about challenges and how you overcame them, and what type of mentality governments and organizations should have in Africa towards developing challenges to break the different challenges of health and science in Africa.
Let me just contribute in 3 dimensions, and which some of it is affirming what Kevin and Slim mentioned earlier. Financial, the continent, in order to grow and meet its weight, this is a continent of 1.4 billion people. The countries must invest in health research. Absolutely, that is financial commitment. It doesn't need to be the same size as the United States, the EU, but you have to have that intentionality of putting your own, allocating your own resources into the game. I mean, otherwise, it continues to be lopsided. It continues to be a long list of things that the continent wish, and hoping that somebody else can fund that. I think partnership will always be critical, and that's why we are on this platform. Partnership with the prize, the Al-Sumait Prize, partnership with other countries there, but the foundation, the foundation has to be the country's own modest investment in priority areas that will identify the key questions that are relevant for their own communities and begin to enable the young researchers to address it. So I think I fully agree with the financial commitment. Second is investment. They have to see this as truly as an investment and not a cost. Okay, I mean, when Kevin mentioned about India at independent people, the debate, rightfully so at that time, was is this a cost to a young country that is struggling with many priorities or an investment? It's definitely an investment. The whole conversation about technology transfer, about intellectual property, I mean, it has to be recalibrated so that and focus more on innovation. What kind of innovation young Africans or centers of excellence like the one that Slim leads invest in innovation? The antibodies that Slim mentioned, neutralizing antibodies that he mentioned there very clearly, were not invented by an American young researchers or a Chinese young researcher or an EU member state by South African researchers. That is innovation right there. And capacitate that invention. Just listen carefully to what he said. He said that antibody, neutralizing antibody, was able to share that with researchers at Harvard, and they demonstrated in monkeys that it was very, very potent. Yeah, this is a clear scenario where technology or the development is moving from the south to the north and not north to south, right? So I hear the discussions about intellectual property and technology. Just invent things and send it to us. And meanwhile, I said that is a wrong conversation. The conversation should be, how can we work together to improve, strengthen centers of innovation, partnership there, and we're using catalytic funding like what you just like what we all were honored to have. I think that is. Lastly, is human capacity. You don't do research without strong human capacity, which means it has to even go be a little bit further than research, and look into academic human capacity development. What is the strength of the university systems in Africa? Because if you have weak university system on the continent there, then there's no way that you produce top-notch researchers, right? So you really have to the basis and say, look, we are strengthening our education system. We are doing that with pride so that a graduate from the University of Durban can hold her head high or his head high and say, look, I'm just as good as someone who graduates from Oxford, where Kevin is, or from Harvard. I mean, that is the countries must be very intentional in doing that. And it can be done. You've heard some examples on this call with Slim, with Kevin, and during my time at the Africa CDC with Slim was part of that whole adventure. Our whole purpose for close to 6 years was a proof of concept that a young institution that can actually be stood up and function at the same level as mature institutions in the West, and it was done with using the human capital that existed at Slim and Madusal, Suleiman Bou, who meet every Tuesday for 1 hour to discuss clinical trials on COVID. Every Tuesday, I mean, from 12 o'clock to Ethiopian time. And it showed that commitment, the determination that even with the human capital, even with the financial capital, you need individuals, leaders, you need leadership to say, we are committed. Okay, there can't be any excuse that meeting at 11 o'clock South African time, 12 o'clock Addis Ababa time, you are missing tons of reasons there. No, you have to be there. So I think I see nothing but opportunity. But you need partnership, you need catalytic funding, you need catalytic investments like the prize that you award every year. I think you may never know the extent, especially projecting 20 years from now, what that impact would be, where a young researcher will pick that up and actually use that in a transformative way.
Exactly. Thank you all, gentlemen. Those are incredibly superb replies to the question. And I love the way that you all have very specific engagement towards it. Okay, speaking to philanthropic organizations such as Al-Sumait, what specific actions, I mean, we've kind of touched upon your answers today, but what specific actions can Al-Sumait Prize take in the next decade of activity that could actually keep things, the acceleration, all of the development that we've talked about? How can we do different types of, can we specify the targets or the different types of categories that we should focus on? Professor Salim?
I think that what we are coming to also appreciate in science is that science is a universal language. Science, despite all the political differences we might have between countries, as scientists, we still can work together, and we do. And that science enables us to cross religious boundaries, gender boundaries, racial boundaries, geographical boundaries. It has a sense of universality about it. And I think that the Sumait Prize is an opportunity to build on that universality in the sense of, can we, as laureates, assist and say, are there scientists in Kuwait who are at the medical school, in different departments, or in the hospitals, middle level of their careers or recent postdocs, offer an opportunity for an exchange, time to come and work with us for 3 months, 6 months. Just come and start some research with us, and they can take it back and finish it at home. But it's about we are building a better understanding between nations.
So it's a two-way conversation, Professor Salim.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's just one example of the kinds of things that Sumait is well placed from KFAS. You know who the scientists are. You have the mechanisms. You know that we are running, big organizations doing research. We can host them. If we can't host them ourselves, we can arrange with others to host them.
Yes. Advice for the Sumait Prize going forward. What should we focus on? Should we change our categories? Do you have any advice for us as an organization moving forward?
Absolutely. Just two very quick reflections. I think don't change too soon. I mean, the price is only 10 years, and you need to keep doing what you are doing. I mean, you are focused on health development in Africa, which takes time before you really know that the impact that is. I mean, you need to let it grow. But at the same time, let me align with what Slim said. I think, and I'll take a slightly different and another perspective is the scientific leadership. I would say that her research leadership. What I find as one of the gaps, I think I've learned to be very humble in my thinking, because each time in Africa you say, well, I think this is the gap. Then you realize that is really not the gap. I mean, the gap maybe is leadership.
I think investment in leadership is clearly an issue. What I would say is that KFAS as an organisation is incredibly well placed to sort of build on the success of the Al-Sumait Prize. I mean, without us being immodest, as it were, I think you've heard in this discussion the way that the prize has been leveraged in different ways by Salim, by John, and myself.
Yes.
And if in 10 years or 20 years you were to do an impact analysis, I suspect it'll be far wider than you would ever imagined when you awarded the prize. And so I would say catalytic effect is one that Al-Sumait should think really about how one could build on that, both as KFAS, but also as KFAS as an organisation, a funding and philanthropic organisation, which is itself well linked across the region, particularly across the Middle East, where there are a number of other big potential science funders. So I seem a little bit self-interested, but I would say one thing I would hope that the KFAS and the Al-Sumait Prize would say, well, look at what we've achieved through a catalytic function so far. Is there any way of other funding partners in the region together to increase on that, and to sort of, if you were
exactly kind of partner up and try to push further, harder.
Yeah, just as we have scientific networks, you have funding networks, and we'd love to see you working in those funding networks to do to replicate even more what the prize has done.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kevin. May I ask you, gentlemen, in turn, for any conclusive statements that you would like to say to the Sumait Prize, and in terms of reflecting as yourself as a laureate, Professor Salim, I'll let you go first.
Sure. A prize is about recognizing excellence. It's about recognizing contribution to society. It's about recognizing the importance of our disciplines in
Yes.
furthering and serving humanity. I think that when we think about prizes, it's not about the individual that's involved. That person just represents a whole village of many, many people who actually have done the work that gets us where we are. It's about recognizing that we have to build these institutions because they have to outlive the individual. Individuals are here today, they will eventually retire and eventually die. But the institutions of science are what we have to be building. And this prize is about building those institutions. It's about having a lifetime of activity that goes on beyond the lifetimes of the individuals.
Yes. Dr. Kevin, if I can turn the mic over to you, your perspective to close the conversation of your experience as a laureate. How would you reflect on the last 10 years, and what would you like to make as a statement from your perspective as from a Sumait Prize, as well as overall your career overall?
Yeah, well, again, as usual, I agree completely with what Seamus just said. Absolute prizes are double-edged sword, as it were. I mean, inevitably they go to people or to organizations. They always represent something much bigger than that. And I think that's the thing to focus on with the Al-Sumait Prize. And at a personal level, I have to say that the prize opened up many areas, not necessarily ones I would have imagined, just in terms of prominence. Lots of people, when they heard about the Al-Sumait Prize and sort of what's it for, it's for sort of health in Africa. It really opened a lot of conversations and corridors, as it were, that are hard to quantify, but are really, really important. So I do think it's been a fantastic initiative. And I would agree with what John said earlier. Don't change too much too soon, because I think I think add on to it for sure. If that will be wonderful.
Yes.
I think building on what you've achieved, and it will grow bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of people's appreciation and understanding of what the prize is about and what it represents.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kevin. I have to celebrate you all in terms of success, of the way that you've translated your success to your organization's success. Every one of your stories has been amazing. But I want to conclude with the perspective of Dr. John. What, from your experience as a laureate, from your experience as a chief scientist, from the organizations that you've worked for, from the seat that you're currently at, what would you like to advise us in the conclusion, Dr. John?
No, really, the resilience we have exercised is an indicator of what we are discussing. That you don't give up. I mean, you are resilient and you stay there for the long haul. One of the avenues to explore is, and a key word here is to explore, is what can you do to invest in young people and give them that capacity and capabilities for leadership, scientific leadership, which means resilience, staying committed. I think the young people now want things that will happen quickly. Okay, I mean, none of the people that have received this award have received it because they did some quick things. Okay, it's because of 30 years experience. Okay, I've known Slim since for the past close to 25 years, and the work that he's done at Caprisa. When you go to Caprisa, the first thought that comes to your mind is that this is a center of excellence, like anywhere else in the world. It's not an African center of excellence, but it's a center of excellence for the whole world. But why did they achieve that? It's because of leadership, the commitment, the resilience that they had all through, and built it from room to room, block to block, and then to the whole institution there. But that spirit of commitment, resilience, and staying there, focus on the issue for long term, has to be incorporated into the young leadership that for science. I think if Al-Shamir can do that, I mean, the prize can invest in that kind, and it could be through or a partnership, a pairing, a Kuwait Foundation and an African group, but the young people that can carry this forward. As my colleagues have said, we'll all retire and we'll all die, but the institutions needs to be there. But that esprit de corps to say, look, I love what I'm doing. I have to stay resilient into it. It's not politics where you want to get to the top very, 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 very quickly. I think that is important. Lastly, is that you touch on, or you're focusing on healthcare in Africa and our healthcare development in Africa, which is so important. I would say not less will matter for a continent that is priming itself to be the youngest continent, a continent that in the next 30 years, 1 in every 4 human beings will be African. Cannot take healthcare as an auxiliary investment. It has to be a primary investment, a foundation on which its entire development will be built. So I think just from that angle, I think you happen to have your fingers on a very, very important interface for the continent, an interface that will lend itself to appropriate partnership. But I think investing in young people in a deliberate manner, in a way that they can carry the flag forward, is going to be a unique addition of the prize.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you today. Every one of your stories, as from before you were a laureate to now you are senior laureates, and joining us in celebrating this 10-year milestone of the Sumait Prize has been amazing. All of your perspective, all of your ideas, all of your advice has been highly appreciated. I really appreciate your time. In behalf of the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Science and the Sumait Prize, I want to thank you all for joining us today and helping us celebrate this very, very special milestone. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, wonderful laureates, for that incredible conversation that we had. And right now, I want to switch over to His Excellency Abdullah Al-Yahya, Kuwait's Minister of Foreign Affairs, for a special word on the Sumait Prize.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة أعضاء مجلس أمناء جائزة سميط للتنمية الأفريقية الكرام، يسعدني ونحن في جائزة الدكتور عبد الرحمن السميط للتنمية الأفريقية نحتفي بعامنا العاشر، عقد من النجاحات والإبداعات التي كرست مكانة الجائزة بين الجوائز العالمية المرموقة. أن أنقل إلى حضراتكم تحيات حضرة صاحب السمو أمير دولة الكويت الشيخ مشعل الأحمد الجابر الصباح حفظه الله ورعاه، رئيس مجلس إدارة مؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي، وتمنياته لنا جميعا بالتوفيق في أعمالنا التي سنواصل فيها بعون الله تعزيز مكانة وسمعة جائزة الدكتور عبد الرحمن السميط للتنمية الأفريقية، تلك الجائزة التي أطلقت عام 2015 بمبادرة سامية ورؤية نبيلة من المغفور له بإذن الله سمو الأمير الراحل الشيخ صباح الأحمد الجابر الصباح طيب الله ثراه. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، إننا اليوم نشعر بالاعتزاز لما حققته هذه الجائزة من مكانة رفيعة بعد مرور 10 أعواما على إطلاقها، من خلال دعمها لأفضل الدراسات والمشاريع العلمية والبحثية والمبادرات المبتكرة التي من شأنها أن تعزز قوام الأمن الغذائي ودعم الرعاية الصحية وتطوير التعليم ومحو الأمية في عدد من الدول الأفريقية. كما أننا نثمن ما حققته إدارة مؤسسة الكويت للتقدم العلمي من كفاءة في الإشراف على جميع مراحل منح هذه الجائزة سنويا، وتتوج جهودها بنجاح المتميز في تنظيم حفل تكريم الفائزين بها في الأعوام الماضية. كما أن ذلك النجاح وتلك المكانة ما كان ليتحقق لولا تضافر الجهود لأعضاء مجلس أمناء الجائزة في إرساء قواعد راسخة لحوكمة الإجراءات للترشيح والتقييم والاختيار، ومساعدتهم في الإعلان عن الجائزة والتعريف بها عالميا، آملا من المولى عز وجل أن يكلل هذه الجهود الطيبة والمخلصة بالتوفيق والسداد في ظل الرعاية السامية لحضرة صاحب السمو الشيخ مشعل الأحمد الجابر الصباح أمير دولة الكويت، وسمو ولي عهده الأمين الشيخ صباح الخالد الحمد الصباح حفظهم الله ورعاهم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I also want to thank all of our laureates for their participation. And I also want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course the foundation that I work at, KFAS, and all the laureates that have participated in Sumait Prize the last 10 years. For more information, please log into their website below.